Good day, Barbados, and welcome to the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.'s Youth Forum in celebration of World Tourism Day, which was held on Monday, September 27th, 2021, and by extension, Tourism Awareness Week. My name is Jason Yearwood, Business Development Officer with the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. in Canada and former Junior Minister of Tourism in 2008. And this evening for our forum, I will be your moderator. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our esteemed panelists. First, commencing with Barbados' Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins, and then five of the former junior ministers of tourism for Barbados who would have participated over the years in the Ministry of Tourism's youth program. So we are going to commence with saying greetings to Mr. Javon Griffith, former junior minister of tourism in 2004. Mr. Justin Seal, former Junior Minister of Tourism in 2005, Mr. Christopher Morgan, former Junior Minister of Tourism in 2012, Ms. Roshana Jones, former Junior Minister in 2016, and Mr. Dylan Ramden, former Junior Minister of Tourism in 2018. This is going to be a tremendous discussion. We're going to take a quick break and return and get everything started. Stay tuned. Welcome back to today's Youth Forum. We are so glad to have you with us, and welcome once again to our esteemed panelists. I want to turn over the floor to the Minister of Tourism, Senator Honorable Lisa Cummins, just for some opening remarks, and welcome everyone here once again.
Thank you so much for welcoming me, Jason, and congratulations to all of the former junior ministers of tourism. I think that perhaps this is an ideal opportunity for many of you to weigh in on perhaps the biggest challenge that has faced our sector in generations. Arguably, typically, we're having conversations around airlift, around what visitor arrivals look like, what occupancy rates are developing into over the course of the winter season as we approach November. This year, for the second time in a row, 2020 and 2022, we're having conversations around the structure of our sector, the future of our sector, and how we can be a lot more inclusive. And what better way to have this conversation except during the course of World Tourism Day and World Tourism Week with our former junior ministers of tourism, so you can share your own perspectives, hear where we are thinking, and perhaps I'm thinking that going forward, we may have to have a far more integrated role for all of you in our tourism development planning. So I'm looking forward to today and looking forward to having you join me on the panel. Thank you all very much for organizing.
Thank you so much, Senator Cummins, for your opening remarks. And once again, welcome to all of our panelists. So we're going to get the ball rolling. Senator Cummins alluded to it briefly just now in her opening remarks. This year, the theme for World Tourism Day was Tourism for Inclusive Growth. And that's a topic that we want to discuss this evening. So I want to ask Senator Cummins this question, but I'm going to hand it off first to Roshana. When you hear that theme, that topic, what comes to mind for you? Tourism for inclusive growth.
When I hear tourism for inclusive growth, I think of a holistic approach. Not only the inclusion of young people or how do we access or tap into the youth target market, but also how we implement gender analysis into the tourism industry, looking at the effects it has on women who take the majority of positions within the hospitality and tourism sectors. Also, in terms of moving away, given the COVID-19 pandemic, in terms of going digital and how do we include that or integrate that within our tourism product. So it's going to take a lot of work, I believe, but I think we have done good so far in terms of adapting. But some of these key components, especially the gender analysis aspect, I think more can be done to ensure that it's included in proposals and also mandates going forward.
Okay, thank you so much. Christopher, I'd like to ask you the same question. When you hear the theme, tourism for inclusive growth, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I have to admit, when I first heard the topic, I was rather confused. Tourism for inclusive growth is lots of nice words. Inclusive growth, exactly what does that mean? But after a while, and I thought about it, I realized that for me, tourism for inclusive growth was seeing exactly how we can take tourism from just being an industry and how it can assist growth of a country, but exactly how that growth of that particular country can benefit all of the members of that country. So inclusive growth for me was mainly how can we ensure that everyone in the process of all citizens, business places, stakeholders, have how we can all benefit from the business of tourism in one particular country. And then it also had to do with inclusive tourism as well, because when we're thinking of having everyone benefit from tourism, how can we also ensure that people can actually enjoy the tourism product, irrespective of where they're from, their differences? So inclusiveness in tourism in itself, more so than just inclusive growth. So for me, it was a more, as Rashad said, a holistic approach that goes into how we ensure everyone can benefit from our tourism product, but how everyone can also enjoy our tourism product.
Great, thank you so much. Javon, over to you. What are your thoughts, your sentiments regarding the topic at hand?
Yeah, when I first heard the topic at hand, for me, I felt it came about as a result of the pandemic. With tourism practically being shut down around the world, this pandemic has now given us an opportunity to do a complete reset of our tourism industry. And it also allows us the ability to encapsulate the population that would have not been involved before, sensitizing the population as to the role of tourism in our local economy, demonstrating all the jobs that can be created through tourism investment, showing the direct linkages between tourism and how the dollars which tourists will spend trickle down through the local economy. So once we can put these factors together, it will then bring out the inclusivity which I believe the World Tourism Organization is out to foster across the world.
Right, thank you so much. Justin, I'm coming to you as well. Give us your initial thoughts.
Well, thank you, Jason. My initial thoughts on tourism for inclusive growth. For me, it meant that we now need to look at other sectors and how they can feed into our tourism industry and how we can create synergies between what we know as a traditional tourism sector, where we have some folks who come to visit us for 2 weeks of the year. We can probably expand that concept now into long-term stays. And I think that Minister and our ministry and our Prime Minister did an excellent job in being agile and responding to the crisis by incorporating the Welcome Stamp project. I think we need to have that same level of thinking, expand into more areas of our economy so we tie tourism in and have growth for all sectors of the economy.
Hearing, your sentiments on the topic as well. Okay. Dylan, over to you. Okay, so when you heard the theme, tourism for inclusive growth. Again? Okay. Okay, over to you, Dylan. In the next few seconds, just give us your thoughts when you heard the topic, tourism for inclusive growth.
Thank you, Jason. When I thought of tourism for inclusive growth, it really sparked in my mind the fact that the tourism industry now has to get a lot more creative in what it considers for growth. Because yes, it's perfectly all right to consider monetary value and jobs created, but inclusive growth, as I was researching it through the various papers submitted by the IMF and the World Tourism Organization, has several pillars which require that the growth not only involves money and jobs, but it also shows agricultural development, industrial development, true sustainable development that will bolster the rest of the country, because we've seen in the past 2 years that the tourism industry is not always going to be stable. The 2 years have shown that. And I think if we really want to be sustainable, if we really want to progress forward, we're going to have to decenter the tourism industry in its own messaging. It needs to be more about the people rather than the people as tourism products.
Okay, thank you so much, Dylan. Roshana, you had answered, yes, you gave your comments before on what you thought was, your initial thoughts surrounding tourism for inclusive growth. So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back after the break and get the minister's response to all of the different views and sentiments given. So stay tuned. We'll be right back for more discussion in the next couple minutes. Welcome back to the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc.'s Youth Forum. Once again, we're having this forum to celebrate World Tourism Day, which was held on Monday, September 27th, and by extension, Tourism Week for 2021. This evening, our panel comprises, many of the former junior ministers of tourism over the years to the Ministry of Tourism's youth program, and of course, Barbados' Minister of Tourism, Senator the Honorable Lisa Cummins. Now, Senator Cummins, before the break, we heard quite extensively the varying opinions and sentiments of our panelists. I saw you were taking note, just like I was, and we saw and we heard as well different phrases like gender analysis, digital integration, holistic approaches, and so forth. What is your response to some of the information provided by our panelists?
So thank you for that. I think if I can start first with Christopher. Christopher indicated that he wasn't sure where the theme, and the term inclusive growth came from, but actually these are terms that originate from the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And as we know, we're in a steady march towards 2023. UNCTAD is currently underway, and there has been an extensive discussion, including in the UNCTAD Youth Forum and that of civil society, on whether or not countries are going to be able to reach the Sustainable Development Goals targets for 2023 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that has been particularly heightened for countries that are deemed tourism dependent. And if I can start perhaps there, then it allows for the frameworks that were then elaborated on by Roshana, for example, when Roshana, she spoke about gender and youth and inclusivity and what that meant. And then Dylan, when he went on to speak about being creative and ensuring that growth goes beyond jobs and the revenue generated into sustainable development. All of those are principles that are deeply enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals. But I want to go back to perhaps pick up on a point raised by colleagues like Justin and Javon specifically, who talked about the level of creativity and the introduction of things like the welcome stamp and long stay tourism, and the evaluation of where we were as an industry prior to the pandemic. Here's what I would say, and here's what is true. The COVID-19 pandemic in a lot of ways has been the worst thing that could have happened in the minds of many. But for the tourism sector, perhaps, while it may have been a terrible and a disruptive event, it did give us that opportunity to look at some of the structural impediments that were there in terms of the sector itself. Historically, we have had a national conversation around how many planes are coming into Barbados, how full are they flying, what are the occupancy rates in our hotels. We've gone to all of the travel conferences and we have engaged with the travel partners, and that really has been the substance of a lot of our engagement for the tourism sector. But here comes COVID-19, and we actually grind to a screeching halt for the first time in history. And there is that disruptive event which forces us to look at the digitalization that was mentioned, to look at the creativity that was mentioned, to look at new mechanisms and new products like the welcome stamp long stay versus short stay, but it also gave us an opportunity to deal with a couple of key things, and they were raised by some of the junior ministers. What are the linkages to the wider economy in terms of agriculture and manufacturing in a meaningful way? I'm not talking about how much produce on its own can be purchased by hotels to service visitors who have come in. I'm talking about something far more substantive like that. And so for me, the theme, tourism for inclusive growth, does force us into a conversation that says the 8% of ownership for the accommodation segment now needs to be expanded, and Barbadians and those persons who are Barbadian businesses or aspiring businesses have to be given an opportunity for enfranchisement and for inclusion. It means that youth who have typically sat at the table in some ways on the periphery or for specific times need to be included so that they have a structured voice in an ongoing conversation at all times. It means that women who were disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, 1 in 2 tourism workers who have been laid off over the last 18 months is a woman. And with her, her household is affected. How do we ensure that there is that level of inclusion? We typically have stakeholder discussions and we speak to owners and managers and proprietors. Who is speaking to and including workers? Who is including the attractions in the direct tourism services beyond the accommodation segment? We have families and communities who live around tourism product and attractions. Have we included them? This is an opportunity, certainly for the government of Barbados, to develop an entirely new and inclusive model for tourism. Our benefits at every level of the economy and every level where people can earn lives and livelihoods, can promote their lives and earn livelihoods that are decent and in keeping with their ambitions as a people. And that's what the theme means to me. And I'm really proud that all of the speakers who have gone before have touched in their own way on many of the key tenets that really have to go into developing that new tourism model post-pandemic.
Thank you so much, Minister, for your response and your insight. We're now going to shift the discussion and make it a bit wider. The panelists have all submitted questions that we want to, pose to you, Minister, and not just to you, but to everyone, considering that we're all former junior ministers of tourism. So, in these next 2 minutes, I want us to have discussion first off on this question, which was posed by Javon. And his question says, as a result of COVID-19, we now have a golden opportunity as a country to shift our focus to the recovery of the sector and to build back better. To the minister, what are the top three current priorities of government in this quest?
This is a great question. And so I think one of the key things we've already identified as a priority we've talked about here, which is the question of inclusion. How do we widen the scope for inclusion of more stakeholders and people to benefit directly from the sector? How do we move the tourism sector beyond the enclave of a few to the sector that benefits the majority at all levels of the community? And that is one. The second part of it is, how do we integrate Barbados as a tourism destination into an economy that becomes a flagship for the business of tourism? And I use this example all the time. I say, what precludes Barbados from developing indigenous brands in the tourism industry that then become franchised and globalized in countries around the world? We have flagship examples in the region like Sandals and Chocolate Caribbean and others who have become exemplars in their own right. They were visionaries in the first instance, and they became global best practice standards and are on the tips of everybody's tongues. What is the next global brand for Barbados in the business of tourism? And with that, we now have to treat to the opportunities for expanded growth for jobs, the opportunities for expanded growth for linkages into the wider economy, and then the development of the related productive sector development initiatives that would have to go along with that. And thirdly and finally, a lot of people tend to speak predominantly about the tourism sector, but they forget oftentimes that we have the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport. We are prioritizing the international aviation sector. Perhaps maybe because over an extended period of time, tourism has always been flowing and we've always had visitors and we've not had any of the interruptions. Aviation and international transport have fallen a bit by the wayside. We are aggressively now in the process of developing a new international aviation strategy for us. We're building out an aviation city of excellence, which is going to be anchored by the Grant Adams International Airport, which allows for us to build out new sectors, new industries, new business, attract new investment, and with it create new jobs, generate new revenue, and create a new niche for Barbados around the aviation sector and the international transportation sector in support of our tourism and our wider economic diversification. That includes things like going after our Civil Aviation Authority establishment. We're well underway with the establishment of the Civil Aviation Authority. We're in the process now of a comprehensive reform of our international air navigation systems. All of those things are underway. So we now have a dedicated push to develop Barbados into the southern logistics hub of the Caribbean using our international aviation strategy. And so the combination of transportation, international transportation that is, and the tourism sector, then we're going to be seeing a redevelopment, a restructuring, a reimagining, and a repositioning of a new Barbados's economy.
Thank you so much, Minister, for that answer. We really appreciate it, and you made some very salient points. We've only just gotten started, so we're going to take a quick break and come back with some more questions and more discussions on shortly. Welcome back to our youth forum. We are in full flight of discussion. Prior to the break, the minister was answering a question posed by former junior minister Mr. Javon Griffith, which surrounded his question looking at the golden opportunity that Barbados has as a country to shift our focus towards the recovery of the sector and building back better. Now, Minister, when you were giving your top 3 current priorities of the government, you mentioned about establishing and further growing the Barbados global brand. And this is something that, we always hear a lot of discussion, at length discussion about that brand. And for those of us who are in the international community and know that Christopher is in Paris, in France, and know that Javon is in London at this moment in time, Justin is in China, even myself here in Canada, there are certain countries in the Caribbean that we go around and we see a lot of branding. Let's call one Jamaica. Like, you can't go anywhere without seeing something Jamaican, whether it's a person, it's a restaurant, it's a scarf, something. So that point piqued my interest, and I wanted to hear from our panelists their thoughts on how we can possibly go about expanding that Barbados brand to something like, maybe the same or similar to how Jamaica has done that. So let me pick on someone. Let's start with Christopher. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I hate being put on the spot. Just kidding. Honestly, I think the first thing you have to do is decide exactly what is the brand that we want for Barbados. What exactly is our brand? A couple of years ago, we focused on sun, sea, and sand. Then there was a break where we focused on cultural and heritage tourism. I have to admit that here in France, I was honestly very surprised to see lots of photos of Barbados and trips of flying to Barbados in the subway in Paris. I was happy, surprised, I was ecstatic. I thought it was an actually very interesting idea. If I have to be quite honest with you, though, I think one of the areas where Barbados excels in France, and my mother's probably going to hate this from me, but it's the rum. Barbados rum is
You can't go wrong with the rum.
loved in France. I was just on a trip for work a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking around the streets in a very very small town, and I came across the equivalent of a French rum shop, and they had, I think, practically every single brand of rum that is made in Barbados. What I think we need to do is to look at each individual country, see what interests them, see exactly what Barbados has that would interest that particular culture country, push it 100%.
Right. Excellent. That's a very great point. Even over here too in Canada, The Canadians love the rum. Recently, I was doing a webinar with some travel agents, and it was featuring one of the local distilleries in Barbados, West Indies from distillery, and they were ready to get on a flight and come straight to the distillery just for the rum. So I certainly hear you for sure. Roshana, I want to get your thoughts as well on how Barbados can perhaps look to expand and make known our brand on the global scale.
I think I'm going to keep it a bit simple. I think first we must look at solidifying who we are as a country, a bit of what, including what my fellow junior minister would have said, and also just continuing to tap into those different markets. I know they're usually like travel festivals, various conferences, but I think also we need to develop our technological aspect of promoting tourism a bit more, especially if you're looking at the youth target market. How do you use Instagram? How do you use TikTok? How do you use Twitter to capture that audience? So I think we're just going to have to strengthen some of the areas that we are good at, but also include other aspects and develop those over the course of months and years to come.
Good. Thank you so much. Javon, I'm going to also pose this question to you because I know after you went through the program and so forth, you yourself, just like me, have worked in the industry. Yeah. So I want to know from your perspective, as someone who has worked in the industry in Barbados, what are your thoughts in terms of Barbados, expanding its global brand?
Right. So for me, I believe that Barbados is now in the most perfect position it has ever had in terms of this upcoming winter. Barbados is now posed to have the absolute best airlift it has ever gotten, particularly out of continental Europe. Having our flights from London now being based at London Heathrow for the most part, having KLM coming out of Amsterdam, having Aer
Mhm,
Lingus coming from Manchester, and Virgin Atlantic opening up Edinburgh, it allows
mhm.
Barbados to grow its wings, particularly in Europe. I believe that Barbados now has an opportunity to go big or go home. With the BTMI now being financed through the travel tax, the $70 travel tax, which was imposed 2 years ago, which I thought was a brilliant idea, it now gives them a bigger budget to be able to go after these larger cities. Germany, for example, we have Germany there, we have Service and Condor, which is coming back, the largest travel propensity in the entire of Europe. Germans want to travel, they have money to spend. Scandinavia, the same thing. The Swedes, the Danish. We have to go big, and we have to keep repeating and redoubling our efforts in these markets, spending money where we will see returns and going after the investments which we are now making. I firmly believe, as I've just said, this winter will be a winter like none other, with all the new avenues of airlift which Barbados is about to open.
Thank you so much. Minister, I want to give you a chance to respond to the sentiments given just now. So if you will, you can proceed.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. And I agree with the colleagues that have all spoken, Roshana, Javon, Christopher. Those are all comments that are well made, and I agree with them. But I want to challenge you perhaps to go a little bit further, because each time we talk about tourism, we almost by default go back to our historical roots around airlift and our source markets and the number of visitor arrivals, and those things are critical. And I think that the development of branding around Barbados helps to drive that. So when Christopher talks about the rum, there's nothing like rum. Rum fixes everything. We're Barbadian people, and so we understand the power of the rum. Yes. And so those are things that in source markets, whether traditional or non-traditional, will help to drive traffic. But here's what I want to be able to force almost as a mindset shift. We have always practiced, and I say this because my background is in international trade. The largest tradable sector is the tourism industry. We have extraordinarily skilled marketers in the BTMI. We have extraordinarily skilled marketing teams on retainer in all of our overseas markets. They're doing their jobs and they're bringing the traffic here. We want to be able and need to be able to grow an economy not on the basis of 280 something odd thousand people, which cannot sustain our livelihoods and ensure that we have a high standard of living. We have to be able to have that throughput from visitors that move a 283,000 site economy into one that has accommodated close to 2 million visitors in the course of a year. All of that is critical. But the sustained growth that we need now at this stage must use that as a plank and go further. What is the inclination for Barbadian businesses to establish domicile and commercial presence overseas? What is the next Sandoz coming out of Barbados? Where would Sandoz, using our international business rules, be dumped, and where would the capital be repatriated? How can we as a government and as tourism leaders, including youth tourism leaders, effect that mindset shift that takes people from the comfort zone where they're awaiting for visitors to come to Barbados and benefiting from that comes here and then investing in the spend of marketing to moving to the stage where we are investing in establishing commercial presences for iconic Barbadian brands that have been developed in overseas markets, expanding our base through commercial investments, and then repatriating that capital so that in addition to the 2 million odd visitors that are going to come, in addition to the airlift that is going to come in, and in addition to the local economic activity, that we are also expanding our economic base to benefit from overseas investments, overseas commercial presence, and repatriated capital coming back to Barbados. That has to be the next wave of expansion. And that's what I'm hoping that we're able to shift the conversation into, having built a highly sophisticated marketing brand that allows us to push even further using some of the recommendations that have been made by some of the team members. So I think all of those things have to go together, hand in hand, but it requires us to think differently about the tourism sector and think perhaps far more commercially and the business of the sector as opposed to the marketing of the sector and the product on its own.
Thank you so much, Minister. We have some more discussion points coming up, so we will take a quick break and then return and have some more discussion. Welcome back to our discussion forum where we have former junior ministers of tourism along with the Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Senator Lisa Cummins, having a great discussion about tourism in Barbados and focusing on the theme tourism for inclusive growth. And having said that, I want to now go to a question that Dylan would have submitted, Dylan Ramden, Junior Minister of 2018, and he submitted a question which stated, how can we reconcile a desire for our tourism product to be inclusive with the fact that many parts of our culture and society, from interpersonal relations to legislation, are very exclusionary to different groups of people, whether they're LGBTQ community, persons with disabilities, persons from other nationalities, that our culture hasn't really been exposed to quite often. Yeah. So that is Dylan's question. Minister, I give you an opportunity to address, and then you share the floor, spread the floor that persons can also give their input to that question as well.
I actually think this is a brilliant question, and I think we've had a national conversation as a country around these issues, but we've not frontally confronted these issues. Let me start by saying, as a country that has evolved from a former slave society, as a country where our ancestry is written on the basis of discrimination and exclusion, it is very challenging for us, generation that we are living through, to continue to practice discrimination towards others and treat to it as almost a rite of passage for us as Barbadians. It is something to which I do not subscribe. I make no bones about saying at all times that I am a Christian. I was raised in the church. I still am a strong member of my own Christian community. I still have a church family that I belong to, and I subscribe to those principles. But I do not think that those principles are in any way at odds with the principles of anti-discrimination and inclusion for all people, whatever their status. We don't walk around as Black people having to fight the same battles that those who went before us had to fight, because they were able to stand up and say, we are real people. We are human. We are not chattel. We are not cattle. We don't have a price. We are not tradable. We cannot be excluded on the basis of our skin color, on the basis of our gender for those of us who are women. And equally so, Barbados must, whether in our national policy or in our acceptance of persons who visit our islands, we have to be able to represent those who have gone before us with pride and say, you have fought for us to have freedom. You have fought for us to have seats at the table and for us to be included, and we do not have a basis on which we can now exclude others. That is a critical part of who we must be. It is not yet who we are. But I'm committed to ensuring that, certainly in my own small way and as a member of government, having an opportunity to frame policy and to contribute to the framing of policy, that that position will be represented, and that on the right side of history I must sit in time to come.
Thank you so much, Minister Dylan. I want to open the floor to you. This was a question that you submitted, so the floor is yours to add some more context to your question, get your opinions out there.
Thank you very much. And Minister, I must say that is an astounding response, one that I wholeheartedly endorse. I think that one of the large issues that we have here is a disconnect between the people who are in power, who are typically older, more well-established, be they higher class or from a different nationality. And that doesn't necessarily allow them to reflect the viewpoints of the majority in society. And then also, we have a disproportionately loud minority which continues to espouse discrimination, not only to people from the LGBTQ community, but also due to the recent pandemic, we've seen this massive, disgusting increase in xenophobia, xenophobia, which really is depressing. But if you look at the youth voices in Barbados today, they are considerably more well-educated, better informed, more tolerant and respectful than their predecessors. But the problem is that those youth voices do not get a substantive role in the formulation of new changes. There's always this discussion about we want to listen to youth voices. We want to hear what people say, what people in the youth community say. But then when these youth voices come to speak, it very much feels like it goes in one ear and out the other. And that is the case for people who come speaking about issues with mental health, people with disabilities, people from other nationalities, other racial groups, even different religious creeds. I've got friends from the Hindu and Muslim community who still experience discrimination in this country. I think if you look at the wider world, Barbados has a lot more competition than it did a couple decades ago. Other countries have developed, other sectors have developed. We see a massive wellspring of tourism culture in East Asia, in the Middle East with Saudi Arabia, and they are very quickly outpacing the rate that Caribbean tourism can manage. And that is due in part to the fact that there have been new innovations that they have latched onto that our tourism culture hasn't necessarily ascribed to. And even just the very fact that we have people in power who I've experienced it myself, they don't understand the new technological reality that we are in. They only want to listen to young people when it comes to come fix my iPad, come how do you work this computer. But besides that, there's very little substantive change.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Justin, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. So jump on in. Let's hear from you.
Oh, definitely. I think there's a long way that we could go in Barbados in terms of addressing issues of discrimination against persons who might not be traditionally within the Barbadian paradigm of of how we exist. For example, the displays of xenophobia coming out of the pandemic were horrid and disgusting. And I do echo the sentiments of the minister. Our society is based on discrimination. There's no place for that in our society at all. Um, Further to what the minister has said before, Minister Cummings, I'm buoyed by her appeal for a wider discussion and a reframing of what tourism is in terms of a conceptual basis, and her call to action for Barbadian industries, Barbadian institutions to go abroad outside of the region and create a small niche for themselves and attract more persons into our region and help to contribute to our economy. The University of the West Indies, well, first of all, I'm the assistant registrar for the University of the West Indies, and I'm posted here in Suzhou, China. And we have a partnership here that has existed since 2016. And we are the aegis for our Caribbean individuals, Caribbean students, not just Barbadians, coming to China to study. Why am I saying that in a tourism context? What are students other than long stay tourists? So, in that regard, I think there's a lot we can do there. There's a lot of people to people cultural exchange we can have so that many of our people understand and appreciate more what we have in common with places that may seem so far flung from us, and how we can benefit on a very granular level in our communities from these partnerships. Looking forward to having some Chinese coming to the Caribbean, maybe at a K-Phil campus at some point.
That would be tremendous. Thank you so much, Justin, for your input. We're going to take another quick break and then return with more discussions. So see you then. Welcome back to the Youth Forum. It has been going quite tremendous thus far. Minister, before the break, we had some very great comments by Dylan and Justin surrounding the whole discussion of inclusivity, all right, for persons and the Barbados tourism product. So I give you the floor so that you can respond to those sentiments.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that Dylan said, which is so important, and I think we have to bear it in mind, there is very much a group of people who have been able to benefit during the pandemic from access to technology, and unfortunately, some of those persons have been displaced, and it has created angst, and it did generate some amount of xenophobia, yes, and resentfulness, and of course, we saw discrimination at an height. And I think one of the things that I would love to be able for us to have as a I don't want to call to arms together as a people is, how are we evolving in an inclusive way? Forget all of the other sustainable development goals and the development trajectory that we're off on. Let's talk about how we treat each other, how we treat people. I grew up as a Barbadian in a country where we used to call people from other parts of the region low islanders and foreigners. And now we've come into an environment where we who are a migratory people, and in every single household we have family members who live abroad because they sought better lives elsewhere. We have practiced historically, it's not new, historically discriminatory approaches to persons who have done the same thing in coming to Barbados. And equally so, many of us are dependent on the economy for its functioning and therefore the tourism sector with it. Yet we have practiced a certain level of discrimination since the COVID-19 pandemic to visitors, while in some instances attempting to excuse local actions. And those things have to be treated to perhaps with a little bit of robustness. And equally so as it relates to the questions of LGBT persons, LGBTQ persons, and the issues that they have faced, those are continuations of discriminatory practices that have no place, absolutely no place in our society. Is it new? No. Does it have to stop? Yes. Has it been made worse by access to social media, where everyone, however offensive and how erroneous and misleading their views may be, has a voice and can gain agency? It has been made worse. But we need right thinking Barbadians and people who are responsible and genuinely inclusive, who understand what kindness and how we should treat each other, what it should look like, and what brand Barbados should be, and who we are as a people should be, to stand up and speak up and say our voices must be collectively louder than those that are problematic and are spewing messages of hate and rejection that have no place in 2021 Barbados, and certainly not into 2022.
Thank you so much, Minister. We're coming down to the final minutes of our session. So what I want to do is have what I call a rapid fire, because there are so many questions that we haven't been able to touch on as yet. I kind of wish that this session was for 1 more hour. Be that as it may, I want to leave this question with the floor and get each former junior minister to answer in a few seconds, okay? And the question is, what is one thing you would like to see done when it comes to Barbados's tourism industry growing, and growing in terms of including all that's transparent in the world, all that we've discussed, just the different things of the world. What is one thing going forward that you would like to see where this topic is concerned of tourism for inclusive growth? Christopher, I'll start with you.
Always putting me on the spot.
Yeah,
One thing that I would love to see, one thing that I would love to see when it comes to the topic is a reintroduction of something similar to the NICE program that existed, I don't know how many years ago, the National Initiative in Service Excellence. I understood that the implementation of it was a little complicated, and especially the continuance of the program. But I think we need to have a national initiative that is similar to that when it comes to the question of tourism for inclusive growth. So something similar to NICE, Honorable Minister. If that's on your pile of activities, I'd love for you to put that in place so that we can have something rolling and get more people involved in being trained on how to best approach certain situations and different people as well.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Rashana, over to you. Couple seconds, go.
All right. So what is very important for me, I have a lot more points to include in terms of regional tasks on air travel. But for me, I think youth engagement, and I think we really need to relook how we include youth in policies, not just when we actually have to implement them, but also at the decision-making table, and not just being tokenistic or just including them when everything is done and decided, but including them, getting their ideas from early on, and also the integration of action, monitoring and evaluation policies, which would govern a lot of the policies and the activities that are made at a national level, but also at regional and international levels of analysis.
Thank you so much, Rashana. Dylan, over to you. Go ahead.
A lot of good points have been made. One point I really, really enjoy is the minister's expanding ownership within the tourism industry, not to just a small select ownership class few, but perhaps democratizing the whole industry, or at the very least attempting to democratize the businesses and workplaces that tourism takes place in. So maybe something akin to Spain's system of worker-owned co-ops, or if you're not willing to go that socialist, just mere democratization of the workplace to truly make the people working in the tourism industry more than just products, to make them active participants in the decision-making and the actual executive functions of the industry.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Justin, your thoughts?
One thing I'd like to see us do is to continue to expand our offering into different markets. I'd like us to reimagine what a tourist is. Again, I would reiterate that a student is nothing more than a long-term tourist, and there are many other markets that have successfully attracted thousands of students into their shores. I think Grenada in with St. George's University where they attract several students from the United States to come down and study for the medical exam. I think of our new diplomatic relations with Ghana and ways that we can expand our market over there. I think about new visa waiver agreements with China and with Thailand. So we already have a framework in place where we can go forward and take full advantage of all these agreements that we have signed and we fully would like to enjoy. I think we need to be a bit more assertive there, and especially with regard to opening up our education sector for more to come in and help bring in that valuable foreign exchange that we all know it comes with the territory of studying abroad, especially if you pay a full price. I think that's a key part of how we can go forward in a sustainable way, but also in a way that our society will be able to manage and enjoy from people to people exchange.
Thank you so much, Justin. And Javon, final word goes to you.
Well, for me, it will start with education, having a bit more tourism awareness from in the level of schools, so we can ensure that persons, particularly youth, really fully understand the importance of tourism to small island economies. And also, the overall objective of that for me would be to ensure that nobody is left behind in the race to build a prosperous industry and a peaceful industry for all to enjoy.
And as we bring the forum to a close, I just want to take the opportunity to thank all of our participants. We want to thank the Minister of Tourism and International Transport, Senator, the Honorable Lisa Cummins, for spending some time with the nation's youth. We also want to thank all of our panelists, Mr. Javon Griffith, Mr. Justin Seal, Mr. Christopher Morgan, Ms. Rashana Jones, and Mr. Dylan Ramden for such tremendous contributions, as not only as young people, but young people who understands how the tourism industry works, and and having gone through that process of being former junior ministers of tourism for Barbados over the past number of years. We also want to thank the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, and of course the chairman, board, and management and the staff of the Barbados Tourism Marketing Inc. for putting this all together. So on behalf of everyone, we thank you once again for your contributions. We thank you for your time. We thank you for tuning in and watching us. And remember that tourism is our business, so let's be sure to do our part and continue to showcase to the world the lovely characteristics that Barbados has for them to enjoy right here on the island. Thank you so much, and good evening.